So we've really been focused around creating a firm that works with the entrepreneurs throughout their life cycle.
And every journey is, of course, different as well, and we have to be super adaptive to that.
Innovation is not constrained by where you live or who you are. And so if we are to represent the best entrepreneurs globally, we need to have an organization that covers all types of backgrounds.
What binds entrepreneurs together is they come up with ideas that change the way the world works today, hopefully for the better.
I think the best founders and the best entrepreneurs recognize that for them to build a company at high velocity, at high speed, they have to build a world-class team around them. And so we're constantly looking for the best people in the market, constantly tracking them, and then hopefully persuading them to come on board on the journey with us.
I think what's so beautiful when you work with technology itself is technology is change for good. Technology is environmental improvement. Technology is inclusive. Technology is global and flat.
So Bullhounders have three important characteristics. They have a forensic interest in finance, they have a passion for technology and the power that technology can really do to change the world and have a real impact in the way we lead our lives. And the third critical point is that they need to have an empathy for what it's like to be an entrepreneur.
I have a lot of passion for entrepreneurs and all the risk they've taken.
And when you're surrounded by that buzz and that excitement and that belief, it really rubs off on the firm. So, and I think that's why we're becoming the largest player in our industry.
We also are driving sustainability into our investment activities. So for us, it's really important not just to back great founders and great ideas, but also businesses that are having a positive impact on the world.
The great thing that we're seeing is these billion-dollar companies now are being built not just in the UK and France and Germany, but now they're being built all over Europe. So Eastern Europe and Asia is obviously developing at a rapid rate. So we're seeing the potential to expand in many more geographies.
Here at GP Bullhound, one of the things we're really trying to do is to provide our Bullhounders with an opportunity to have an impact on the next generation of technology entrepreneurs all over the world.
You're there for the love of change and the belief that technology makes the world a better place.
Hello and welcome to our first presentation in Luxembourg. It's a big commitment for us, Luxembourg. We are now Luxembourgers. I don't know if it's Luxembourgers or Luxembourgish, but we are that now. So welcome to our first presentation. You heard the word entrepreneur there a lot. We are always been about supporting the entrepreneur. That's the mission of GP Bullhound. And so today it's not just you guys in the room, but we have hundreds of people online joining us from our network through our media channels. And so today we want to present ourselves, but we also want to present Luxembourg in a great light to all those entrepreneurs out there as well. So the schedule for today is Per Roman, the co-founder of GP Bullhound and head of asset management, will give us some words to start with. And then we will go on to our very well-known tech predictions report. We have 10 predictions each year, but we'll be barring down into 3 predictions with 3 people from our investment team. And then we're going to be doing a short presentation with some people, some of the stakeholders from the ecosystem in Luxembourg, to really talk about why this is such a dynamic environment for people to think about starting their businesses. So with no further ado, over to Per Roman.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks everybody for coming. It's amazing to be here in this great, beautiful city, always sunny, I can see. And I mean, over the last 20 years, we've had the pleasure of building, I think, a truly global business. We span east to west from Hong Kong to San Francisco, New York, Manchester, London, and from north to south, Stockholm, Berlin, soon Zurich, Paris, down to Madrid. And you heard me say in the speech that the world is flat. Well, actually, the world is a sphere, but when you flatten out the sphere and make it a map, and you want to try to find the real center of the world, you find the great city of Luxembourg. So you put your pin there, and we decided to focus all of our efforts to make this the center of our activity and then to go out in the world from here. So it's a real pressure and a real chapter step up for us, this activity today. And I'm proud to see that we have so many of the great product heads of the firm. I mean, I'm really trying to build a multi-asset manager that is dipping into this true deep technology domain expertise that we have built over the years. And I really think this is just the beginning for GP Bullhound, and definitely just the beginning in a long-standing 100+ year relationship with Luxembourg. So thanks a lot for having us. Back to you, Ben.
Thanks, Per. So straight over to Olja, who's going to tell us about the first prediction. Remember, there is 10 predictions, and for people at home, you can download the whole report using the QR code that you will have seen earlier. But over to you, Olja.
Hello, and I'm also very, very pleased to be in Luxembourg. Admittedly, it has been at least 4 years since I have been there because of COVID, and we'll address also how COVID has affected the supply chains. And our prediction, the first predictions that we have today is technology supercharging supply chains. The logistics industry has always been at the forefront of, on the back of everybody's mind, but it's an industry that is huge. And today it's at the front of everybody's mind. Why? Because it's a sector that affects every one of us, and it affects the whole value chain. If you think of logistics, it affects us from manufacturing to the end consumer. It's a sector whose value is $9 trillion annually. It's 11% of global GDP. And not only that, it's growing, or it's expected to grow at 6.5% per year through the next 5 years. However, it's a very interesting industry because it's also very inefficient, effectively. It's first of all very fragmented. It's a lot of very small players that have to work with each other closely. It's still not digitized at all. So a lot of the transactions between these players, whether it's a truck driver or whoever else, is per email or per fax, actually. It's also a very complex because you're delivering containers from China to US and then transmitting it throughout the US and then have to deliver to the consumer that is sitting somewhere in Cleveland, Ohio. And nobody actually today knows where that sofa or that telephone or whatever else in that whole supply chain. And COVID obviously multiplied the problems that this industry has had previously, because we've had obviously a just-in-time delivery. And now you had COVID where it affected both the supply and the demand side of the equation. So on one side, on the supply side, obviously manufacturers stopped producing or reduced manufacturing during COVID. And on the demand side, what we have seen, and we've all experienced that, we've obviously reduced consumption in the beginning, and then we increased consumption significantly as sort of COVID, as we were coming out of COVID, or hopefully we will be coming out of COVID. So that actually calls for software solutions, and you've had investments in this space, but the investments ballooned. So last year alone, in 2021, there's been over 11 billion of investments in the supply chain, various factors of the supply chain, in particular in the software sector. That's double the amount of 2020. And actually this year alone, and we are obviously in the beginning of February, we've already had 3 billion of investments. 2 days ago, we've had a big investment in a digital freight forwarder where Andreessen Horowitz has invested 900 million at an 8 billion valuation. This is a company that's looking only at shipping, right? And shipping containers and placing containers throughout, primarily actually on the Pacific route, so just a small portion of the value chain. So we do see this sector attracting significant investments going forward across from sort of software driving the logistics to last mile delivery to warehousing and so on. And so we see that as a big trend going forward. On that note, I would like to pass to Joachim, who will address a different sector.
Yeah, thanks, Olja. So my name is Joachim. I'm a partner at GP Bullhound, based in the Stockholm office, and work with our asset management, and particularly on the growth funds, where we invest in technology and software companies around Europe and the world, doing anything from 3 to 50 or even 100 million euro tickets. So if you have interesting software companies, you should definitely come and speak to me or any of the GP Bullhounders here in the audience today, or Olja. So I'm going to talk about DeFi, and I think that everyone got to see this taking place a lot last year. You know, everyone from people in El Salvador to teenage girls making millions, minting NFTs. I think we're into the third inning of the blockchain revolution with this sector shift that's happening. So what's really interesting with blockchain and crypto at the moment, and particularly DeFi, is that it's driven by these online communities that have gone on from trading in crypto and making money or losing money there to now actually building software applications. And if you pull this idea a bit further, what we will see is that we're creating software companies out of fintech. So traditionally, when you wanted to start a bank, you open an office down here and you went to the FCA and applied for a banking license. Of course, the fintech revolution that we have been benefiting from investing in said that, well, you don't need a bank office anymore. You just need a banking license. So you took that and put it on the web, and that worked out well. And what we're seeing now is that you're basically throwing out the banking license too, and you're just running everything on software, and you're doing it open source, and you don't even need server halls anymore because the software is run on the computers of the people in the community. And it's reaching staggering proportions. I always like to pull up these examples. You know, if we take a traditional fintech like a Coinbase, they now have next year anticipated revenues of $7 billion. And that's a company that have received around $500 million in funding. But if we take a company like Uniswap, that also is an exchange on the web for crypto, they make now 700 million euro revenues, so about a tenth, but on $11 million funding. So the scale and the time that you can build these businesses is changing, not only linearly, but exponentially. So I think if there's one takeaway from DeFi, it's that if they won't disrupt the existing world, they will build a new one.
Yes, my name is Inge Heidon, and I'm running the public side. And my trend I'm going to talk about today is the semiconductor shortage. But I would like to start to say that I think if I expand the area a little bit, that this is the most important area in the world. And why? I would argue that ASML is the most important company in the world, all categories. If ASML doesn't work, nothing works. We can't develop anything further because they make the most complex chips in the world. And that drives everything, software, everything we're talking about. So I would say this area is really, really important. What I want to get out of talking about my trend today is that you guys have an understanding when you leave this room that the simplicity that comes out in the paper about the shortage of components and so on is not that simple. And let's go back in history. The semiconductor industry has been driven by one company, Intel. We all follow their agenda. They develop new chips, and we have produced equipment to produce it, and we have computers and so on. Everything's been running by Intel agenda. That's not longer the case. So nowadays, there's a number of companies around the world developing chips, which means that the speed of development increased a lot. And that's why we need to separate by demand issues in the industry which we have today, in the car industry, which is very, very low-end components, not complicated components at all. And that problem is more of a cyclical nature, so demand really. But we also have more electrical stuff coming into the cars, electrical cars. So we have an underlying demand there. But the interesting thing is here, if you talk about the car industry and the problem there, it's more the fact that the components are so old, so we don't have equipment to build these old stuffs anymore. And that's the big problem, which sounds ridiculous, but that's the big problem. So one important number to remember is 8-inch wafer. That's the size of the wafer, which is producing those type of sensors. We have a person here producing the sensors today, and those are not produced, those equipment, so they can't increase capacity. It's very, very hard, which means this is going to last for quite a long time, sadly enough. So don't believe it's over tomorrow. Then we come to the even more So it's an urgent problem. And that's in the higher end. So we come down to 5 nanometers, 3 nanometers, and that demand will be a problem for the next 20 years. Why? Because we want smarter, faster products all the time now. We have the money in the companies, so Facebooks and Amazons, all of them have cash. So they're developing new stuff all the time, which means we can't run fast enough, which is really, really interesting. So what I'm really saying is that we have gone from an industry that's been extremely cyclical, extremely driven by one company, to an industry which is really driven by innovation and speed. And this is one of the big bets we have made in the public side in this industry, to put money into this industry, which we think is gone from the cyclical industry to the long-term growth industry. So I think that's the key point I want to make here. And remember that when you read the newspaper, they're talking about the shortage in car industry and so on. Yeah, that's a little bit of a cyclical nature because demand of the car industry and the underlying growth. But once again, that's that part of the industry. The high-end part where we have the smartest, newest AI chips, the smartest, newest PlayStation chips, gaming chips, which drives a lot of this industry, we will have shortness for many, many years. Thank you very much.
I think you said that ASML is a big employer in this region as well, right?
Yeah, it is massive. Sorry to say I'm a little bit biased saying it's the most important company in the world, but honestly, if we don't get new chips, all the things that Per talked about and energy consumption in the world, everything is dependent on us getting smarter things. So if ASML stops, sadly enough, as they are the only supplier in the world would stop in development of new products.
Okay, well, you have some real industry experts here, so if there's any questions, let me know quickly. But just to give you a bit more background on the three people that talked, Inga runs our public markets product. Olja is developing our new credit fund, which will be coming live summer, second half of this year. That's a very exciting product for us. And Joachim runs day-to-day our private equity venture funds. So please introduce yourselves to them. So for the next part, we shall bring along our five panelists, if you'd like to take your seats. So in preparing for this panel, when I was asked to, you're in the middle, yes. You have one. You go up front. Musical chairs. When they asked me to present a panel on Luxembourg, I was like, ooh, I'm not sure I can make that. It's a very interesting one. And then I got going and getting to know these guys. And I think especially for the people at home, I mean, a lot of you guys will know this already, but there's really something special happening in this ecosystem. And I think it's really striking that you can see the broadness of the panel all in one room. And, you know, I just don't think this would happen, for instance, in the UK, where you can access so many stakeholders. So I think it's really something for the people at home, the entrepreneurs at home, to think about what's going on in this really dynamic ecosystem. So let's start off then with some introductions. We didn't manage to line up against there, but that's fine. Let's start with the entrepreneurs. Maybe you can both tell us a little bit about yourselves and your business, just briefly.
Well, thank you, Ben. And I'm Olivier Portenseigne, so I'm the CEO of FundsDLT. FundsDLT, which is basically a market infrastructure based on blockchain that we've started in 2016, which we get to reality in 2020. And now we are rolling out internationally and to international clients and based in Luxembourg.
Great.
Hi, everyone. So I am Luc Falempin, the CEO of Tokeny, Tokeny.com. We are one of the leading tokenization platform in the world, actually. So we help financial institutions to represent their asset on the blockchain. Last year, we tokenized for a bit more than 28 billion euros of assets. So it's already a reality.
Great. And we're going to move through the spectrum. So Nasir, you were an entrepreneur, and now you're part of, not the establishment, that's not the right word, but something in between. So tell us about yourself.
Yes, hello, thank you very much. My name is Nasir Zubairi. I'm British. I hope you can tell that by my accent. I've lived in Luxembourg for 6 years. I run the Luxembourg House of Financial Technology. We're a foundation that essentially is here as a national platform to drive digitalization in financial services. So working with great entrepreneurs such as Luc and Olivier, but also with the traditional sector to help make sure that they get on the ball in terms of ensuring the future competitiveness of the traditional finance sector as well.
Excellent, thank you. And moving into what every entrepreneur needs, which is a bit of money. Ghislain?
Yes, thanks a lot for having me here. So I'm Ghislain Terrier from the European Investment Fund. I sort of come with two hats here because on the one hand, I'm in the venture capital team of European Investment Fund, so EIF, and we are, I think, the largest fund-of-fund investor in venture capital in Europe. We do, I don't know, on average, probably 150 investments per year. But I'm also running the investment side of the Luxembourg Future Fund, which is a mandate EIF advises on behalf of the Luxembourg government. And for that, the purpose is to develop the local ecosystem. I've been here for 10 years, and I'm ashamed to say that I still don't speak Luxembourgish.
Okay. And to cap it all off, the government, I don't know if I could call you the government, but you are part of the government. So tell us about yourself, Michele, and what you do.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Ben, for having me here. I work for the Minister of Economy, where I take care of developing the startup ecosystem here in Luxembourg. So really making sure that, you know, elements like Ghislain mentioned, financing, infrastructure, and other elements which are necessary for the startups to thrive in Luxembourg are put in place. But I also take care of digital technologies. You know that Luxembourg is very focused on digital technologies, on data, but on sustainable data economy is really the strategy we have published recently. And so this is my business at the Ministry of the Economy, and so very happy to be here and to see JP Bullhound developing more activities in Luxembourg, because we also believe that having VCs like you here is one of the keys to further develop this ecosystem that has grown very fast over the past few years.
Great, thank you. Well, let's start with the entrepreneurs. I mean, they're at the heart of everything we do, and they're the ones really powering our future economies. So why are you based in Luxembourg? Quite simply, why? Olivier?
Well, it was pretty natural for us because we were at the start in 2016, an initiative that was incubated within a Luxembourg well-known player, which is the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, together with a subsidiary that I was heading, which was FundSquare at that time, and basically very natural for us to grow basically in Luxembourg. But there are many other aspects, obviously, that are interesting and important for us, which is, I mean, I don't need probably to remind that Luxembourg is the second largest fund center, and we are active in fund distribution in the world, right after the US. So certainly the ecosystem around the fund industry was really important for us. Another aspect was the international aspect, because you cannot build a Luxembourg market, basically. It's an international market that you're building out of Luxembourg with a global reach. And also, I mean, I have to admit, the proximity with the government, the regulator, and also the favorable regulatory framework, especially when we talk about blockchain, was something definitely important for us. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting that you, by definition, you have to go global from day one in Luxembourg. And I think as an investor, we're just looking for companies that are global. We don't want local winners, we want global winners. And so that's a really interesting, just in the DNA of every company here, which is very, very interesting. Luc, tell us, I mean, obviously Joachim talked about DeFi. I mean, that's heavily in your space. Tell us why you're here.
So indeed, in our case, it was a bit different, because we could have set up the company anywhere. We were entrepreneurs who just sold the company, and we were like, okay, where should be our next venture? It was 2017, the crypto boom, the first crypto boom, but we wanted to do serious things. We wanted to do financial instruments. So we are like, okay, what are the main financial centers in the world? We hesitated with Singapore, and we realized Luxembourg is actually the best place to issue securities, and we wanted to tokenize securities. And I agree that Luxembourg, it is the center of the world on the map. This morning I started at 8 a.m. with some people in Singapore, and I will finish at 7 p.m. with people in San Francisco. So that's a fact. And yeah, in Luxembourg you have 3,000 funds, something like this, managing 6 trillion euros of assets, almost. Exaggerating a bit, but it's almost this. So you have all of the expertise, and for clients issuing new securities, it's a serious place to do it, where you have the right framework, legally speaking, but also now about blockchain, because we have very advanced blockchain regulations in Luxembourg.
Great. Okay, it's actually 5.9 trillion. Just to put that. Now GP Bullhound's here, we'll push you through 6, so don't worry about that. Michele, tell us about how you're trying to help this then. What initiatives are you working on at your level?
So I can only confirm, first of all, what the entrepreneurs said. But really, Luxembourg is in the center of the world, but is really in the center of Europe, and is a hub for startups to develop into Europe. A hub not only geographically in the center of Europe, but also politically, because we were one of the founding members of the EU, and there is this strong link by EU institutions being here, and so being able to speak also at EU level with the right people. High-performance computing is, for example, an example. But what have we tried to do and what are we succeeding in doing in the Luxembourg ecosystem over the past 10 years? Really, the number of startups has continued to increase. The latest mapping from Lux Innovation shows around 500 startups, tech startups now active in Luxembourg. Around 15 incubators, most of them private. This is very interesting because our input from the government really to develop this tech-driven ecosystem has really been taken over and supported by the private actors in different sectors, being fintech, ICT, or others. What we are doing at the ministry is really to, first of all, try to be in contact as much as possible with the startups. I think this proximity, both with corporate decision makers, but also with public institutions, startups are able to discuss with us and to quickly get to the right person in Luxembourg is one of the key advantages. What we're doing is also building a stream of initiatives that help startups from early stage. We have built accelerators like the Fit for Start that every 6 months are bringing companies from all over the world to get accelerated through Luxembourg. And of course, financing. We're participating in seed funds, in the Luxembourg Future Fund, as Ghislain just mentioned before, because we believe that is this inclusive ecosystem and very connected ecosystem that will make the difference. And of course, helping also companies go abroad and internationally, because as you mentioned, Luxembourg is this hub for companies to build a multicultural team. On average, a Luxembourg resident speaks 3.5 languages. How important is it to build a team from the beginning, which is multicultural, multilingual, to be able to address a few of the European markets straight away from Luxembourg? So this, I think, are a few of the advantages of Luxembourg, why startups should start their business or develop their European business from Luxembourg, but also the support that we're continuously giving, both technology-wise, because we are focused on developing a sustainable data economy in Luxembourg, and our investments in digital infrastructure prove it. But also, and I will stop here.
But I'm very impressed with about 3.5 languages per person.
Indeed.
I mean, that's about 3 languages more than I speak.
And we all know how the team is at the center of those startups.
Yeah.
And so we're here to support startups. This, I think, is the message on our side.
Yeah, definitely. So Ghislain, we know blockchain. We know this is a hub for blockchain now. There are some other initiatives, other sectors within tech that are being developed here. Tell us about a few of those.
For sure. I think overall, and I think you heard it from Michele, that there's a support for tech in general. And actually, it's funny that you mentioned blockchain because that's quite a recent focus, and because blockchain overall is more recent. Historically, if I have to look at what we've done, the three pillars when we launched the LHoFT together with the government in particular was around fintech, and that's because of the obvious synergies with the local ecosystem. I mean, second largest country in the world for asset under management, but also, you know, a lot of structures, banking system, and so on. The second one was cybersecurity. And this is also because of the synergies towards fintech, but also because there was sort of a frontier market at the time. I think it's an obvious choice now, and we see more and more specialist funds around that, but that was a bold choice. And space, which might seem a bit surprising for a small country, you know, in the center of Europe, physically centered, that's correct. But actually the space effort in Luxembourg originates from the 80s. If you think SES here was launched in 1985, so there was an early bet taken by the government and the LHoFT, but also the government initiatives were really focused at that. We've done a number of investments, and I think in there, you know, recently developing the new space, and we discussed, I think, with a few of the people here, you know, about space situational awareness, Earth observation, and how, you know, we invest. We like that it's less capital intensive. So for a country like Luxembourg, it makes more sense, you know, than larger countries. But that it's actually the infrastructure from nanosatellites, microsatellites, and so on can be used from the data angle then for a lot of software and applications. And that's something we liked a lot. Now going forward, indeed, in addition to these, I think the blockchain angle is very important, and Luxembourg is really at the forefront. We are trying to develop that both from the fund aspect, you know, that Fabric is active here, but also from the startup angle. I would say, if I had to say two other sectors that we'll see focus, I think logistics and supply chain is an important one, and that's both from the history here as well. I mean, you have a huge cargo airport here, so that makes a lot of sense, but also the central geography location in Europe. And probably like data and AI, machine learning, so data analytics, AI, and so on. If you look, Luxembourg has one of the best supercomputer in the world. Meluxina was open, I think it was last year. So there's a lot going on in there, and then it's all the application from that to the other sectors. What I would like, and going forward in our collaboration, and I think that resonates also with the government, is that we go also into the sustainability, both so environmental sustainability, environmental impact, and maybe also social impact at some point. I think that's also interesting themes.
Yeah, I think there are themes coming down from the government, and there's a full commitment around that, which is very impressive. Of course, you know, technology is all well and good, but what you need is people to build companies. And so, Nasir, we had a great conversation yesterday about this. You and I are both from London. Obviously, London's cool, and I don't always think that Luxembourg is. But then when I started looking into it, I thought, you know, obviously in London, you can't get a mobile phone signal. You can't buy a house. You can't travel anywhere because the traffic is terrible and the infrastructure is broken. But actually, Luxembourg has got some really interesting advantages. So you're a well-traveled individual, lived in lots of cities. Why did you end up here, and why would you say this is a great place to build a family and a life?
Thank you. Yeah, so I've lived and worked in 9 countries now. I mean, I was in banking before, so I did the obvious London, Tokyo, New York, Singapore. As an entrepreneur, I've been in London, Brussels, Berlin, Bali, and here. And I did come here, actually, like these gentlemen, to set up a company. I just launched a bank in Germany, Solaris Bank, and I came here to build a digital custody bank. And it just truly amazes me, the proximity of the people and the can-do attitude. You see this logo on the planes, you see it all over the city, you see it on the side of the bridge. Let's make it happen. There is an agility here which makes it a bit like a startup, an agility which is very appealing to me, to be able to make things happen within that framework. And lo and behold, within about 6 months of me being here, I'm sat in front of the Minister of Finance, and he's asking me to set up the LHoFT Foundation. And obviously you don't say no to a Minister of Finance. So that's how I ended up setting up and building the LHoFT. But around that, as I say, this is I've been here I will be here 6 years next month. It's the longest I've lived in any country in 30 years now. And I call this home. They haven't given me a passport yet, but I hope they will. I am a complete dilettante with any language. I speak English and I sit in the heart of Europe. Now, I don't say I'm incredibly embarrassed by that. But on the flip side, that's a tremendous advantage when it comes to international business. And you've heard that point. You have to be international. And the scalability that Luxembourg provides is incredible. You know, when I go around the world and I'm talking to firms that are potentially looking at setting up European operations, be it San Francisco, be it Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Middle East, Dubai. I mean, in most of those meetings, particularly with larger tech firms, maybe, but any tech firm, you'll have a lawyer sitting there, right? And this is just one silly little example. And to be able to tell the lawyer that they can write their contracts in English is a big deal, right? To be able to apply for regulation in English, to be able to do business in English is a huge deal. And, you know, my ex-wife was French, but I still can't do it. It's terrible. But unfortunately here, as soon as people figure out I am English, they start talking English to me. And if anything, the capacity of English just continues to increase, and I think Brexit's had a huge impact on that. Plus, quality of life, look at the beautiful weather, and look at this, it's amazing. It's like this every single day,
Is
I'm
it
telling
really?
you. Yeah.
My God, that's amazing, yeah.
Honestly. It's barbecue season all the time here. It's a lovely place to live. The pace of life is fast and hectic and progressive, and with this sense of wanting to get things done and the sense of being able to achieve things. But, you know, I love London. I love great cities. I love New York. New York, when I was a 20-something-year-old, was a fantastic place to be. I love Berlin. But I don't want to live in any of them anymore. I love being able to visit them. I mean, I can get to London faster from here than most people commute to central London. I think it takes me about 2 hours door to door, pretty much, which is not bad, right? Yeah. And I can pop over whenever I want, but living here, that's something very special.
Yeah, the wages are high as well. And you told me yesterday that bus drivers in Luxembourg get paid 80,000 a year. So I'm obviously in the wrong industry myself. So, I mean, there's all these wonderful things. Is there anything missing in this ecosystem, or is there anything that needs to be improved, do you think? I'll open it out to the panel. Anybody, any feelings on that?
Okay, maybe I start on this one from the EIS perspective, you know, of having seen several ecosystems emerging. I would see one maybe more peculiar or specific to Luxembourg than which is more Luxembourg focused. I think the one on the ecosystem is unfortunately, and it will be coming, is having a major success. You know, I mean, there was Skype, but actually, if you look at the Skype mafia, it benefited other countries, and that was because well, Luxembourg is very international, business model very international, and then the people were actually going back. So in Estonia, if you look at what the former Skype employees did, it's incredible. And I think the next success story in Luxembourg that will bring that would be very benefiting the ecosystem. So to bring a network of business angels, potentially mentoring, but also I would say eager entrepreneurs willing to have their own success and replicate that. I think that's the one side. Then the more Luxembourgish, and sorry for saying that, but is really about I think the cost of living at some point, you know, will be something that needs to be addressed to be able to attract talents, because here, if you look in the industry, I mean, the salaries are very high. You mentioned that. So how do you convince someone to join a startup and work for equity when you can have a nice salary, and especially when you see then the cost of real estate and so on. So that's.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's about vision as well, and the reason why they are joining, and probably the leadership that some of the entrepreneurs, I hope, are bringing to these people that I think are pretty convincing, even for a lower salary versus also equities. So I think, I mean, Luxembourg, even if I think like any country, we are struggling sometimes to recruit the right talent. I mean, we have a good advantage to join Nasir. I mean, that people like to come to Luxembourg, basically live here and work for startups or fintechs. So that's clearly an advantage. But yeah, I mean, you need to complement that sometimes with other setup. But attracting talent is not probably less of a struggle in Luxembourg than elsewhere. So that's something we enjoy. But what is missing is pretty something that I probably want to mention, and with all the respect of the investment you are doing, but sometimes we are lacking investors and risk takers, really, in terms of putting the right level of money sometimes on and betting really on certain startups and fintechs. I think, and it's not Luxembourg only, but Europe in general, where I think we are versus the US or even Asia, still a bit doing investment, but drop by drop, not too much.
We talked about this yesterday. You know, the institutional environment in Europe really needs to step up. The pension funds, the state funds, and start investing in this space. Right? It's a road we could go down as a conversation, which we probably won't. But Nasir,
I was just going to make a little comment. I think it's yes, this problem is in Luxembourg, but it's a European problem. And our team at the LHoFT, we've helped firms raise around 450 million over the past 4 or 5 years. Now, I mean, I'm not going to act as an investment banker, but we do understand from our experiences, myself included, in investing in firms, about how to go about what are VCs looking for. We've built a very good network across the European Union and further afield. VCs are in the business of finding good companies, so we present them good companies, and good companies get funded. I think the bigger issue actually still relates to early stage funding. There are very few countries, I think, in Europe that have solved that problem. Within fintech specifically, given that you typically are dealing with longer times to cash, so you often need some intermittent rounds and to cash and capital to go on a bit further. It's a tricky one. And I mean, you know, we talk about cost of living in Luxembourg. House prices have gone up here, but house prices have gone up everywhere in Europe. And when you have a relatively low-risk asset with high returns compared to a high-risk asset with high returns, it's a difficult paradigm to get people to put money into startups. And I think broadly, European Union has to look at that, but also on the flip side, my bigger concern is also around commercialization of intellectual property and R&D in Europe, which is, I think, where we're losing the battle with the US and with Asia. We don't do it effectively, and we have better research institutions, more researchers, and potentially, therefore, better commercial intellectual property than anywhere else. But we're leaking it out, and we're losing it. And going back to your point about big companies, I mean, Europe has only produced $200 billion companies in the past 50 years, right? I mean, that's saying a lot. So it's more of a bigger issue. Luxembourg tries its best, and I think we do a good job in that.
Maybe my side, joining some of the comments there, I think at European level, the idea of having more unicorns, having more scale-ups. I represent Luxembourg at the European Innovation Council, and this is one of the topics that comes back regularly, and where I think there is now an ambition from Europe to really go further. And indeed, this creates this pool of entrepreneurs that have reached this 1 billion companies target, and that can really spread the knowledge, but also their team can really create other startups and get into this cycle. Coming back to Luxembourg, I think the growth of the ecosystem has been spectacular over the past 10 years. Luxembourg has a certain size, and I think we have to focus on very high quality startups, as at the same time increasing the volume of startups. But what I think is very important is now that we have this vibrant ecosystem, that we really put all our efforts together to promote it internationally. And that's why I thank you very much for this kind of events, because I think we have already amazing companies in Luxembourg, in fintechs, on specific platforms in space that are growing exceptionally. And this is why also at governmental level, we have created Startup Luxembourg, which is a unified platform that really represents the brand of the ecosystem. It's an inclusive brand where all the players can join, and that we are already using to represent Luxembourg in all big events, Web Summits, Slush, and many others. And this, I think, is really where the whole ecosystem, and of course, we are there to support, should push forward in the next few years to get Luxembourg even more recognized and those entrepreneurs more recognized at European, at international level, and it will help, of course, also expand their business internationally.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, for me, there's definitely something, as I say, going on here. There's something really amazing about this ecosystem. And GP Bullhound is here now to help, you know, with events, with advisory, with our great investment teams, you know. But Luc, maybe just finishing up with you, you're the entrepreneur as well as Olivier. What do you need going forward to create, you know, a global champion?
We need to reach the decision makers because Luxembourg is the back office for finance. A lot of things are happening here. A lot of people are working hard to make it happen. But the decision makers are usually somewhere else, in London, in Paris, in other financial centers. So even when a lot of people are convinced here that we can help by opening this new infrastructure, which is the blockchain, we still need some decision makers to take this strategic bet, so to make sure it goes up to this kind of persons.
Okay, okay. So there's still work to do. All the pieces are in place, and it's just getting it to where it needs to be.
Yes, but I think it's in progress, because more and more everything is digital. So more and more the needs are obvious, becomes really obvious. And now it's about cost efficiency. It's about more liquidity for investors. So it's about education, and more the decision makers are listening their own teams and not only clients. So it is happening step by step, but we can feel sometimes that it's good to show a solution in Luxembourg, but we need to reach the decision makers in other financial centers.
Excellent. Well, thank you, panel. That was really, really amazing. I've learned so much about Luxembourg from you all in the last week, and I feel very, very positive about it. Thank you to everybody that's come today. I mean, I must say, for those of you at home, we had an absolute full house. There are people out into the bar area. We had so many people turn up. So I think it shows the support that everybody here is giving to this ecosystem and how much everyone wants it to succeed. So for the entrepreneurs online, I know there's a few hundred of you, you know, look into what's going on here. I think this is a great place. Speak to us, speak to these wonderful people. And we're here for the duration. So thank you for joining us, and thank you and good afternoon.